Hello and welcome to Looking Through Luke, a YouTube series where we systematically work through one of the ancient biographies of Jesus known as the Gospel of Luke. My name is James and I'm so glad that you've found us. Whether you're a skeptic, a curious onlooker, or indeed a follower of Jesus, my hope is that together we would have a clearer view of who Jesus is, the claims that he made and what he did, and that along the way we might even meet Jesus himself. Feel free to ask questions or comment below as we learn together. I'm so glad that you're here, so let's jump into our next episode. Well, welcome to Looking Through Luke, Winter Edition. We have heaters here in the studio, but it is cold and we're rugged up. Hopefully you're watching this for the comfort of your home and that it's warm and comfortable. We're jumping in today into the second part of the story of Jesus' parents presenting him as a baby at the temple. Last time we looked at Simeon, an old man who had been waiting to see with his own eyes what God had promised him, that he would see the Messiah, the one who saves. And we looked at that and his reaction to Jesus and the words of prophecy that he spoke. While Joseph and Mary are at the temple, another figure, Anna, makes a brief appearance. Let me just read the 4 verses that this refers to from Luke. That's the biography of Jesus, the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, verse 36 through to 40. There was also a prophet, Anna, the daughter of Peniel, of the tribe of Asher. She was very old. She had lived with her husband 7 years after her marriage, and then was a widow until she was 84. She never left the temple, but worshipped night and day, fasting and praying. Coming up to them at that very moment, she gave thanks to God and spoke about the child to all who were looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem. When Joseph and Mary had done everything required by the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee, to their own town of Nazareth, and the child grew and became strong. He was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was with him. So this little section's about a lady named Anna. Anna, we're told, is a widow and has been a widow for many years. In fact, she's 84 and she was married for 7 years. Most girls got married at that time at the age of about 13 or 14, so she was likely widowed in her early 20s. And she's been a widow for the last 60 years. Luke also tells us that she is Phanuel's daughter from the tribe of Asher. And there's nothing particularly significant about that. It's just another indication from Luke that this story, this narrative, is located within a historical framework. It's not made up, it's not random, it's something you can go and reference. It's something that Theophilus and those reading this account could go and verify. And we're told, Luke tells us that Anna is a prophetess. There's actually a biblical tradition of women in the Bible who are described as prophetesses. We have Miriam and Deborah. They're probably the two most well known, but we've also got Huldah and Noadiah. You can look them up and see where they're located. Isaiah's wife, the prophet Isaiah, his wife, is also described as a prophetess. And this is through the Old Testament. And then in the New Testament, Luke, the author of this biography of Jesus, he writes a sequel called Acts. And Luke describes the daughters of a man named Philip as prophetesses. Also in Acts, Luke tells of how the Apostle Paul knows of several women who function as prophets as well. What does that mean? What's Luke telling us? Well, that Anna is a mouthpiece for God. The role of prophets was to call people's attention to what God is saying, to what God is doing. So what is God calling our attention to here? What is God saying here through Anna? Well, before we get to that, Luke paints a picture of a woman who is devoted to her God. We read that she never left the temple, but worshipped night and day, praying and fasting. Now, Luke isn't actually saying that she physically never left the temple. It's not like she slept there overnight each day. It wasn't her home. But he's making the point that whenever the temple was open, Anna was there. And she was constantly engaged in worship, that is, lifting up her praise and honor and esteem to the God that she loved and served. She was constantly praying and fasting, that is, abstaining from food and sometimes water, as a sign of seriousness and devotion to God, and as a sign of intent regarding her prayers and how seriously she's taking her relationship with God. Luke wants us to know that this is a woman devoted to God. She's devoted. Devotion can take many forms today, I think. Sometimes you'll hear it described of a married couple, or people together. They're devoted to one another in love. Most often, I think, at least in Australian culture, we see devotion expressed in fandom on the sporting field. Where I come from, Aussie rules, Australian rules football is a really big deal. It's a big sport. And that's, partly because it's the best sport in the world. But there's something about it that incites incredible devotion and loyalty from the fans. I used to live in the United States, and if you've ever been to a college basketball game or a college football game, you know too just how crazy fans can be, how devoted they are. You see the same thing in the Premier League. If you go to England and you watch fans as their team comes out onto the pitch. And one of the things that really gets up the nose of real fans, true fans, fans that paint their faces, fans that wear their team colours and their scarves, fans that scream at the top of their voices until their voices go hoarse. One of the things that really irritates real fans, true fans, of course, is casual fans. Fans that only seem to turn up when the team's winning. Fans that are never around through the hard times when your team's languishing at the bottom. But after 20 years of heartbreak, suddenly your team finally gets a win, and there they are. They've been fans their whole lives, and nothing can get up your nose like a casual fan. Sometimes I think about that in relationship to people's devotion to God. There are a lot of people who call themselves Christians whose devotion to God seems to be pretty casual. What does it look like to be really devoted to God, really sold out to God? I've met people who are really devoted to turning up to church, really devoted to having a good reputation or to being seen as a moral person, or even devoted to being a good person. But none of those things, of course, are a devotion to God Himself. Well, Anna's activities here, in her context, Luke gives us a picture or describes a person who is totally focused on serving God. Totally focused on God. I wonder what it looks like for those of us who know and love God, who follow Jesus already, to be totally focused on Him. Some of the accusations of Christians from people who don't follow Jesus, perhaps even from people watching this video, is of the hypocrisy, the double standard, the flimsy way in which Christians often seem to go about their faith. And it sometimes seems to lack any real substance. I just wonder, I can't help but wondering if that is connected in some way to just how flimsy and casual sometimes our devotion to God really is. She's a person who's totally focused on serving God. What we do and how we do it reflects our priorities, reflects the things we serve. Amongst my friends and peers, even in my own life, one of the things I'm tempted to serve are my children's education. You see parents with kids my age driving their kids all over the state and country, invested in every single extracurricular activity to try and give their kids the edge. And at one level, it's admirable, it's beautiful, but that's the thing that they're really serving, their kids' education. Sometimes we do the same with our careers or our relationships. What is it that you're serving? What is it that I'm serving? Anna, she's serving God. There's no doubt about it. And I think Luke includes this little picture of Anna alongside the story of Simeon, in part because it required in those days 2 or more people as witnesses, serving as witnesses, to give credibility to a testimony. So Mary and Joseph have taken the baby Jesus to the temple to do what the law is required of them. And Simeon has testified that Jesus will cause the rising and falling of many, that he's the Messiah. And now we have a second witness, Anna, to verify that this is true. This would hold up in a Jewish court of law. The theologian and commentator Bock, who's written a commentary on Luke, he says that Simeon and Anna show that before the Messiah came, and that's what Simeon and Anna are declaring, that Jesus is the Messiah, that God's people lived a good but unfulfilled life. God's people lived a good but unfulfilled life before the coming Messiah, before the arrival of the one who would save, before the arrival of the deliverer. A good but unfulfilled life. And I wonder whether those words could be applied to anyone watching this video. Good, but unfulfilled. I've met so many good people. I've met so many people who I would consider are much better than me. Really good people. But in the words of Bono from U2, they still haven't found what they're looking for. They're still unfulfilled. They're still restless. They're still searching. They're still yearning. And maybe that's you. Well, the invitation that Luke is extending to us as we investigate these claims of who Jesus is and what he's done is an invitation to discover that fulfillment comes in Jesus. I think perhaps that the invitation that Luke is extending to us as we finish the opening scenes of his biography that center around the birth of Jesus, for those of us that might be good, but if we're really honest with ourselves, are still feeling unfulfilled, that fulfillment has in fact come in Jesus. That's the message of Simeon. That's the message of Anna. Fulfillment is found in Jesus. Of course, that leads us to the question, how does Jesus bring that fulfillment? And that's a video for another day. In fact, Luke will take us there. That's ultimately the thrust of his account of Jesus' life, to demonstrate to us how Jesus is the fulfillment. But we see that Anna gives thanks to God, and then she speaks about the child to all who are looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem. Remember the function of a prophetess, as Anna's described, to show people what God is saying, what God is doing. Well, in this moment, she's fulfilling that. She's declaring to anyone who would listen, anyone who's hoping, anyone who's looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem, the deliverance of the people. Well, where are we going to find that? Well, says Anna, in this baby, in Jesus. And we finished that little passage by reading that when Joseph and Mary had done everything required, they returned to Nazareth. And the child grew and became strong and was filled with wisdom. In other words, his perception and understanding of God's will grew, was enlarged, and the grace of God was on him. Our friends, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope and pray that if things have resonated with you, maybe you've been thinking about what you're serving, or where your priorities lie, or how strong your devotion is to certain things. If you're a follower of God, it's worth asking the question, how devoted am I to God really? Where does my devotion lie? And if you deep down know that you're good but unfulfilled, don't give up, don't despair. Look to Jesus, look to what Luke has to say about Jesus as we go through it, and I'm confident you'll discover where true fulfillment lies. Thanks for joining us. See you next time. Thanks so much for watching. Feel free to make a comment below. And if you did find the video helpful or interesting, please hit the thumbs up and give us a like, and click the bell notification and subscribe. It really helps us get these videos out to a wider audience. We're not trying to build a massive following or channel. We are simply trying to communicate the truth of who Jesus is from the Bible. So if that's something that you can get behind, we'd love your support by doing those two simple things. It really helps us out. Thank you, and see you next time.